Hello, and welcome to another episode of 18-Minute Experts, the podcast where we unpack big ideas in group benefits, all in the time it takes to take a brief walk at lunchtime to grab some lunch. I'm your host, Michael Kettner, and today we're diving into a topic that touches nearly every group benefits advisor, employer, and employee at some point. It's disability management. Now, we all know that disability claims, both short and long-term, can be complex, costly, and emotionally charged. But what if we could help our clients take a more proactive, compassionate, and strategic approach? What if we could shift the conversation from claims management to early intervention, sustainable return to work plans, and measurable outcomes? To help us explore what that looks like in practice, I'm thrilled to be joined by Liz Scott, CEO of Organizational Solutions, Inc. Liz is nationally recognized in the disability management world and has spent her career helping organizations across Canada and the US navigate the often murky waters of absence and accommodation. Her approach combines data, discipline, and deep empathy. And she's here today to share some incredibly practical insights you can start using right away. But before we get started, a quick plug. If you like what you hear, make sure you hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss a future episode. You can also find us at www.peoplecorporation.com/18 Min Experts. And if you're enjoying the series, leave us a quick review. It helps us reach more advisors like you. All right, let's get into it. Liz, I have to say that when this topic came up in our podcast planning sessions and we started to look around to see who would be a good interviewee, your name kept coming up from all aspects of People Corporation and those involved in our industry. But for those who maybe don't know you, why don't you share a little bit about you and your past experiences?
Amazing. Well, that's really nice to hear. I actually heard that at a conference the other day as well. So I started Organizational Solutions 24 years ago after being the director of risk for large multinational corporations. So I worked for them in the US and Canada, and it was a very interesting experience. And that had happened a couple of times in my career. Before that, I was director of risk for a large, I call it automotive, what do they call those? Third-party automotive companies. And it was great too, except for I worked for them in Canada and then was promoted over to the US. So when I came back from the US for the third time in my career, I said, I am Canadian. And what I want to do is open a company to help Canadian companies with their disability management. Here we are, 180 employees, 600 clients, and it has been wonderful. I'd say my education also supplements this. I have 2 PhDs. One is in organizational behavior, and the other one is in industrial psychology. So beyond that, through various career experiences, I have a Master's of Engineering, an MBA, Master's of Science, and originally a nursing degree. So, which leads to why we hire predominantly healthcare professionals in our field, because we're managing disability claims. And we really feel it's so important to think of the person, to think of the human behind the illness, and how can we help them with their recovery and their return to work. So that's sort of what Organizational Solutions does at the core. We say the elevator speech. What is the elevator speech? That we help people get back to work following disability. So it's not about whether they're on short-term disability or workers' compensation or legislative leave. Really, our goal is to help them through that medical maze into a role back at work as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because I would imagine it's hugely process driven, but yet with a lot of empathy, a lot of care, a lot of human touch, and getting that balance just right.
Oh, 100%. And I would say empathy is one of the number one things when you're managing a disability claim. And also, you have to imagine that not all disability claims are approved. So We also need a lot of tact and compassion and the ability to guide someone back to work when, in fact, their disability is not something that should be disabling them from attending work.
So diving into the topic, let's start with just a basic question. What is disability management and why do organizations need it?
Disability management in its core is really, it's more like ability management, I would say. It's really helping people that have a disability get well and return to work. So why do clients need this? So we work with employers, and employers usually have a short-term disability plan, or maybe they have just EI, maybe they just have sick leave, and they definitely have workers' compensation, Ontario, WSIB, BC, WorkSafe BC, Quebec, CNEST, and we are nationwide, so we help them all. But they need help. Like, employers don't have this expertise in-house. So all of our team, highly experienced in sort of managing through that. What's the claim initiation? So how does a claim start? Does the person have the right diagnosis? Are they in the right treatment and care? Are they focused in on return to work? And if you add in the workers' compensation, then we talk about legislation. And we want to make sure the legislation is interpreted correctly and that, in fact, employers understand their obligation on return to work, immediate return to work, and that the employees feel supported when they're off on a work-related claim. So from a model perspective, you think about disability management broadly, it is really helping people return to work. But from a tactical perspective, of course, there are standard operating procedures in place that claim initiation, claims management, return to work, and ultimately delivering to the client what they want is help with their individuals, help with their employees while they're off on a disability.
I know a lot of organizations have group benefits and advisors put that in place. So why would an advisor look to a third-party service provider like what you do instead of just using the programs that are available at the insurer?
100%. So if I can talk a little bit about the differentiators. So number one, when you think about let's talk about the money first. So when you look at the average durations in the traditional model, the traditional insurance company model, durations of disability claims last about 60 to 80 days. When you look at the disability management area, People Corporation, Organizational Solutions, what we have for durations is approximately 30 to 40 days. So right away, you're halving the duration. And why? A number of things. The insurer waits for all the paperwork to arrive before they reach out to the employee. That could be 3, 4, 5 weeks. So, and what they're not going to decline the claim then, they're not going to be able to assist the employee into appropriate treatment. So what we do is we contact the employee within 24 hours of receiving notification from their employer that they're off work. And right away, we're talking to them about return to work. So in the insurance company model, they're usually saying, send me a piece of paper that proves you're disabled. Whereas what we're saying is, we're here to help. How can we assist you in your recovery and return to work? See how those two things are very, very different, because the insurer will go back to them 2 weeks later and say, send me another piece of paper that proves you're disabled. And then 2 to 3 weeks later, send me another piece of paper that proves you're disabled. Sooner or later, the employee starts to believe they're disabled. Whereas what we're doing is saying, let us help you get well and back to work. Let's focus in on what you can do, not what you can't do. And that is such a significant differentiator when you look at the difference between an insured product and a third-party administrator. So really a big difference. And then someone would ask me, well, why do we get involved in workers' compensation claims? Why can't the CNEST or why can't WSIB or WorkSafe do this on their own? First of all, the adjudicators do not care, and They follow the process. They adjudicate the claim. They don't care about what the employee's inappropriate treatment and care. They don't care about the cost to the employer. So really what we do, again, is get involved, ensure that the individual feels focused in on a return to work, make sure that they know their employer misses them, and that we're going to do everything we can to facilitate that return into the work environment.
You're absolutely correct. I like one of the things that you were talking about when you were talking about that disability mindset of when you're working with an insurer, when an employee's working with an insurer, you're in this constant loop of proving that you're sick or disabled, right? You're just going, I don't have anything meaningful to bring to society. And it's trying to change that and going, okay, maybe life has changed, but there's still a contribution.
Exactly. Giving that person back their purpose. And you can imagine someone goes out on disability and no one contacts them. This is a job that they gave their life to in many instances, and nobody cares to talk to them for 5 weeks. No. So really that initial 24-hour reach out is so vital to the process.
Yeah, and even though a lot of employers don't know how to react in these types of situations, like, can they call the employee? Like, what can they ask? What can they talk about? What's the process there? And so having a third party like yourself takes a lot of that off their desk, and they can just call and say, how's it going? Right? Like, we miss you. So with that in mind, are there any interesting case studies that you could share with us? Any interesting stories about some of these cases that you work on?
I'll give you sort of two scenarios. I'm going to give you a scenario where, in fact, we had an individual. The individual didn't come to us right away. The client at that time, was not using us for all cases, but did have this very problematic case. They had an individual, a high-functioning engineer, and he had gone off. The physician had diagnosed him with depression. They were trying various medications. Nothing was working. It was ridiculous. By then, the person was off for 12 weeks by the time we intervened. The very first call that our recovery facilitator made to the individual, they said, tell me a little bit about the history. When did you first see these symptoms? It's like the symptoms were depression. The person felt they didn't have a purpose. They really felt a little confused sometimes. Turns out that in the history, we found out that he had been in upstate New York camping with his kids the week before the symptoms started. So most people today are educated enough to immediately click into this. He did not have depression. He had Lyme disease. So he had been treated for upwards of 12 weeks for the wrong condition. And all it took was one call to ask your history. So those are the types of compelling things. And I've got dozens of these stories. A fellow that was misdiagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis just happened to be an allergic reaction to something, and it's just like, oh my goodness, the stories that you can hear, which is another reason why we hire healthcare practitioners. So the nurses and kins and foreign trained physicians that we hire know that they know how to deal with conditions. So that's sort of one of the case studies that we see quite often. And I would say the other case study that we often see is people that naturally there's a lot of mistreatment, a lot of mismedication, but people that are having difficulty accessing care. And that is significant. So within our program, we have another program called Cognability, where we can actually get someone in to see a psychologist within 48 hours. And that makes such a difference to someone. It's incredible. Someone that's been waiting, 3-4 months to get in to see a psychologist. It's absurd. So we have a lot of case studies surrounding early intervention by the right specialist. And that really can make a big, big difference in the outcome of those cases.
So that leads into my next question. Naturally, what is the typical ROI that an employer could expect or plan for with implementing a disability management program?
Yes. And it depends on where they're coming from. But certainly if they're coming from an insured product, as we chatted about a moment ago, we can take it from sort of we'll use 60 days to 30 days, or even if we use 70 to 35 days, right away, they're seeing a significant cost savings, so about 50% savings on their plan, which is incredible. But for employers, I mean, usually we're dealing with HR departments. So I would say the other is more of a softer ROI. People feel they're being taken care of. And that's so significant when you think about, the risk on all employers of turnover and trying to keep employees happy and making sure that they've got a good connection with their employees by treating that person well where they're on disability and also helping them return to work is so significant when it comes to the employment relationship. So those two things, the money and the people. And at the end of the day, this is a very human business. The other thing that we're really well known for is communication and making sure that the client always knows where their employee is. And we have technology that supports that. So we have a portal for our clients. The client reports to us the claim in the portal. And then, of course, the reports in the portal, they can see exactly where that individual is at any point, day or night. They know the current status on the claim. They can also go in and generate their own aggregate reports. So from an HR department perspective, they could say, I have a report up to my senior executive. What's our biggest diagnosis? So they can go on an aggregate basis and say, wow, mental health represents 30% of our files, or musculoskeletal represents 30% of our files. And then they can put focus in on what programs can they implement from a health and wellness perspective to address their largest disability categories. So, and the system is all permission-based, so only those with the permission to see it. And from our team's perspective, of course, they only see the clients they're working on. They do not see anything from the other clients, except again, on an aggregate book of business basis. As far as I know, we're pretty unique in that regard, and our portal has gotten significant positive feedback from our clients, and that's a huge value to clients to be able to see where their disability claims are at any point in time.
You bring up a good point, because oftentimes a group benefit plan is so reactive to what, like if someone gets sick, then someone needs a prescription and it reacts to that. But it sounds like you're giving the information to provide prevention, to get out ahead of it, to give those services before they're even needed, or at least that advice.
Yes, 100%.
So what does the future look like for disability management? Are there any interesting trends that are happening within Canada?
I think so. I would say there's a couple of things. Number one is the advancement of medical care in general. And I would say that AI is helping with that. Even, personally, I had a doctor's appointment the other day. My physician said, do you mind if I use AI during this appointment? I'm like, yes, go for it. So I think there is going to be some evolution of care, some improvements in our medical system. There was a study done over at Mount Sinai in New York, and they showed that the analysis of a CT scan, AI could catch things that the radiologist would not. I think that's really going to help from the perspective of disabilities and getting things diagnosed earlier. The other thing I would say is, even if we don't think about technology, I think people are always thinking about how can we help people more. So, for instance, we're connected with, we have a whole preferred network of providers, but this one actually, this neurologist, a colleague of mine, he opens clinics all across Canada to deal with concussions. This is fantastic. That clinic's outcomes are so much better than anywhere else. So you are seeing emerging providers that really want to focus in on a specific area. I do think, too, with the we're hoping the destigmatization of mental health and people being more likely to talk about mental health, I think that is going to really improve the treatment and care for mental health. Lastly, I would say in this field, technology. technology. And even within our own system, we are building algorithms. We already have predictive analytics. So really looking at it from the perspective of what are the variables that will result in the best outcomes when we're thinking about, mental health cases, when we're thinking about cardiac cases, when we're thinking about cancer cases even. What are the variables that result in the best outcomes? And on that point, you can think about pharmacogenetics, not a new science, but certainly being used more. And if the person can get onto the right medication earlier in their disability, from a technology perspective, the pharmacogenetic report shows you red light, green light, yellow light, and what medication should you be taking to get the best outcomes. So technology has really got a solid part in the future of disability management. And even for us, we're integrating, of course, those algorithms, but also our continuums of care are being right in our system, built right into the system. Our standard operating procedure is built right into the system. So all of those things, you no longer have to rely on people remembering or being trained properly because all the prompts are there. From a disability management perspective, I think there's going to be a lot of progression in technology over the next several years.
Like, it sounds like most organizations could benefit from working with an organization like yours on disability management, but are there some industries that truly benefit more or could really use a program like yours in a bigger way?
Oh, and that's such a tough question because at the end of the day, all industries, all people, all humans can use this. You do have to factor in that government employers have not always used disability plans for disabilities, to put it nicely. So there's not necessarily the focus within that sector to return people to work. If we're looking for the best client, of course, the best client, you look at those that really need people, that really care about their people, that really definitely are committed to helping people get well and coming back to work. So retail, we do a lot of work in that sector. They have high turnover. They really need the people, and they ultimately do care about their people. We know for sure manufacturing, for sure oil and gas, it's so hard to recruit and find people. So they need the people. If they're on disability, they need to be coming back. Aviation, definitely. Every profession, really. I can't think of any that wouldn't benefit from a disability management program. We say our best client is those that are committed to their employees.
A couple of those industries that you mentioned surprised me a little bit because I always thought like transportation, that would be an industry that could really benefit, or community social services, like nurses, and because that's high stress and disability management could be used. Retail surprised me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And well, you think about it, retail has a lot of young people coming in. So I would say retail more from a workers' compensation perspective, because, you have young people come in that not to generalize, but a lot of people, they haven't really been in full-time jobs or in part-time jobs until they actually get a job. And now they're lifting, they're shuffling, they're interfacing with clients, interfacing with the community. And not all people are nice people either. So, they've got a lot of stress in that job as their first job. So if they get hurt at work, and yes, of course, then it comes back down to the prevention aspect, and we should be analyzing what's going on and training people better when they come into the workforce. But there's a huge need on the workers' compensation area. So short-term disability, you're right. Some of it is more like I think about professional firms. Absolutely. Transportation. Absolutely. Oil and gas. Absolutely. And as you said, health services. Yeah, nursing homes, retirement homes. Oh, I think I've just proved my own point. Everybody.
Everybody. That's the answer.
That's the answer.
So based on that, this podcast is for group benefits advisors here in Canada. If an advisor is interested in using your services and programs with their clients, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Oh, well, feel free to reach out to me individually, at orgsoln.com. But we also have a full sales force. So naturally, any of our salespeople would be happy to help. And the phone number is 905-315-7179. They can get us that way. Our website, www.orgsoln.com, or of course, sales@orgsoln.com.
And there you have it, folks. Another episode of 18-Minute Experts wrapped up and ready for playback. The conversation was packed with insights, and I hope it was just as valuable for you as it was for our listeners. Remember, what you hear isn't just talk. It's part of our mission to arm Canadian group benefit advisors with practical, independent advice that they can take straight to their clients, prospects, and communities. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Because when it comes to group benefits, knowledge isn't just power, it's your competitive advantage. Stay curious, stay sharp, and always stay awesome. Until next time.